How do you test the spirits? So around this time of year, Halloween, Samhain, I believe that's the original pronunciation, perhaps. I normally do a video asking people to please not participate in Satan's most sacred day, a day that honors death and the unclean spirits. Even if you don't know about it, there are all kinds of pagan witchcraft rituals and even human sacrifices that are done on Halloween. So even if you aren't involved in such directly, you're still empowering them, even indirectly, by just participating. So here are a few verses you might want to prayerfully consider. Leviticus 18, verses 3 and 4, which we are told there not to do the pagan practices. Uh, so even if your child does look cute and everyone else is doing it, um, you can dress up your child on other occasions. And so there's just so many reasons not to do Halloween. Um, Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 25 and 26, which says not to bring a cursed object into your house. And you may think it's just candy, but just realize that many witches and warlocks celebrate this day and curse candy and such. So please realize that uh, witchcraft is fully blown rampant these days. Even if you're not aware of it, trust me, it is. I'm not saying that every piece of candy is cursed, or I don't know all the ramifications of such curses, but I'm also saying that there's probably a lot more candy that's being cursed than you are probably aware of. And curses are more real than many people believe. Otherwise, why would so many, you know, witches and warlocks and those that do the black arts, the voodoo, those in Haiti and all over places all over the world, why would they still do the stuff? Because it works, because they put their faith into it. And that's really the power there. And so they put curses on people that are unsuspecting or just think that curses are foolish. Curses are real. Lastly, Deuteronomy chapter 12, verses 29 through 32, where Yah tells his people not to worship the gods or these pagan nations because that's an abomination. And sure, you may think, no, I'm not worshiping their gods. It's not like um, I'm signing a contract and giving over blood. Okay, more than likely, probably not. But when you partake in pagan rituals, you are actually, in fact, making some type of agreement with the enemy. When you start doing their practices, the things that define them, you kind of are making an agreement with them. So I'm not trying to berate you. I'm just trying to help you, to protect you. There's just, again, so many ways to get around celebrating Halloween. Now, of course, there are going to be arguments that say, we just dress up our kids like Bible characters on this day. Okay, if you really do that, there might be some people that do, um, but you'll just have to excuse me for the rants because Halloween is a day that Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, thanked Christians for allowing their children to worship the devil. Just something to think about. In any case, that won't be the last opinion on this subject matter, so I will simmer it down because that's not actually what I wanted to talk to you about today. What I want to talk to you about today is how do you test the spirits? as I think some people will want to know this. I think the worse that things get as time are going along, in these days as we get closer to the tribulation and such, um, more people are going to have to start confronting the unclean spirits, because really there won't be enough deliverance ministers to go around. So it might be your time at bat, to step up and put some of the stuff into practice that I'm telling you about. And so, just again, something to think about, because we are heading more and more in that direction, and more people are starting to manifest. And I think this is going to start happening more and more. But for this discussion, let's start with 1 John 4:1, where the Bible states, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is from God. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you heard was coming and now is in the world already." Question: is that the only way to test the spirits? Okay, so that's a rhetorical question. I'll give you the answer this time. The answer is actually no. So then that would mean then that this particular verse, it is a truth, but it's kind of more hinting at something. Uh, it's not uh, it's not the end all be all. And so it's basically stating that when you're working with, unclean spirits, or any type of spirits, really, they have to be tested. And there are many ways to do this. So I'm going to discuss some of the ways that, that I know of. Uh, but there's many other ways, I'm sure, as well. And some of those ways that you test with are going to depend on the person that you're working with, the environment you're in, what type of entity are you working with? For example, are you working with the soul of a person? Are you working with their human spirit portions? Are you working with unclean spirits? Are you working with soul fragments? And regarding the spirit portions, has one of their spirit portions been hijacked and is not really who they say they are? Because this happens a lot. So, and I wish I could simplify this for you, I'll tie it up in a nice bow all really quick in this Q&A, but here I'm just, here and now I'm just gonna mostly make you aware of the challenges, which should help make it less confusing for if and when you have to know this, because again, the times are changing. Now, to be honest, I think I've only asked that question of an entity only once or twice. Has Yeshua, Jesus, come in the flesh? And I forgot who it was, but someone was telling me that they looked at this verse differently, and it made sense at the time, although I don't exactly recall all the how they exactly put it. But the point was more about that Yeshua is currently in the flesh, more so than he has come in the flesh. You can play with that yourself. Uh, just a thought to consider, but I shall continue. Now, if you're working with some type of soul fragment, since they are in the spirit realm, they can see things or discern things a little easier some of the time. So oftentimes, I'll ask the soul fragments, Is there a demon around? Is there some type of darkness, some type of evil presence that's around you? And many times they will let me know. They'll be like, mm-hmm. And so if you're doing that, keep in mind that there may be an unclean spirit nearby as well, sure, in which case they may not be able to talk freely. So you want to be aware of that potential situation as well. I've had some before that come back to me after we got some unclean spirit cast out, and they were like, sorry, I couldn't talk. But again, sometimes they can. Um, you'll also want to remember that the various entities of what they say, because sometimes you can catch them in a lie. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's an unclean spirit that you're dealing with, because even soul fragments can lie because basically soul fragments are parts of people. And guess what? I probably don't need to tell you this. People lie. And so do soul fragments. So by paying attention to what they say, they will sometimes give hints or give themselves away. Um, Sometimes I'll ask the entity that I'm confronting, talking to, I'll get them to say, hey, I want you to repeat these words. Say, I love Father Yah. I love, Yeshua, the one in whom there is only love and truth and pure light, something like that. Because if I ask them to use the generic term God, they surely have no problem doing that, because they know that they're going to mean that word very differently than the way that you might be assuming. And so, and again, obviously, if you give the qualifiers and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to say that, um, that would be highly suspect. But again, it could be a soul fragment that doesn't like the Godhead either. Maybe they've been programmed or something like that. But again, these are some good tests to do that you have to play with and learn how to, use and maneuver around. So sometimes it's tough trying to discern what type of entity that you're working with and who is actually speaking. Because sometimes the soul fragments might pretend to be an unclean spirit, and then the versa versa, the unclean spirits might pretend to be a soul fragment. I remember having this session with this lady this one time over a period of time. And in our sessions, this entity kept coming up saying that he was a demon. He just kept interfering. And after a while, I was just like, okay, you know what? Let me just spend some time in this and figure out what's going on. I got to asking him some questions, and I believe that he was an alien human spirit, a disembodied human spirit, free roaming spirit, whatever it is you want to call it. Basically, that this was a human that had been roaming around so long in the earth that he didn't know that he was a demon. Because we actually got him to be able to go to Yeshua, to Jesus. And I was like, you're not an unclean spirit. And he's like, I'm not. You can't make this stuff up. Anyways, now, if you have multiple soul fragments up, you can ask Yah, God, to shine his pure light, that has no darkness, no deception, that is all truth, um, not relative truth, but is righteous truth, uh, to shine on all of the entities. And I've had some of the others that were there, hey, look around and see if there are any there that are not who they are claiming to be? Are there some that are deceiving? Are there some, has the light brought them out? The truth brought them out? And so the more entities that you can get up, um, sometimes the better, because they can look at each other in that light. And it's generally a good thing as long as it doesn't get out of hand, if it doesn't cause too much confusion, or if it's too much going on for the client. Um, with some clients, they can handle, having multiple fragments, entities up. Other people, not so much till they find their groove, or just not at all. But we pray for Yah's truth, so that any unclean spirits cannot deceive, cannot camouflage, that they'll be seen for what they truly are. And, just keep in mind that unclean spirits can appear as objects as well in the spirit realm. They're not necessarily beings or entities that have, a head, arms, legs, any number of those. Uh, but they might look to be some type of inanimate object. Uh, but in any case, I find that this works pretty well, having God shine his pure light, love, truth uh, on the different entities. But again, keep in mind that some of the soul fragments might say that they don't like Yeshua. I have a client who has soul fragments, and they are constantly like, we don't like Jesus. He molests us, sexually, and they don't want anything to do with him. Obviously that is a fake Yeshua that the client's perpetrators installed, knowing that one day this client might try to get some help from a minister. So we have to try to convince the soul fragments, like, nope, that's the fake one. And the first few times it's taken a while, but it seems like lately it's getting easier with some of the other ones. Not exactly sure how that works. If you can get some input from a person's human spirit portions, this is good to do as well, as our human spirit is another resource for us to use for our healing. Just keep in mind that even our human spirit portions can get replaced by unclean spirit imposters. They can get hijacked. Unfortunately, this happens more frequently than you may think. Of course, you can always ask a member of the Godhead if an entity is clean or unclean, if it's an unclean spirit or not. However, that doesn't always work for various reasons. I think because the Godhead wants us to train and find other ways of doing this, not always just to push it off on him. And so sometimes I might ask Abba, hey there, and I may not get an answer. Then I'm gonna be like, okay, well then let me ask Yeshua. And I may not get an answer. Then I ask the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and then I'll get an answer. Or I may start with one of the other two, and again, because they all play different roles. And so I hope that helps. I want to share this one story. I was with this pastor once, and with his ministry, and a client, one of the former clients, came in that we hadn't seen in a while. And as we were talking to him, just out of the blue, he would turn a different direction, and he would salute. And we were like, okay, like, what is that about? Because he would just salute the air. And he was like, well, that's Jesus. He's telling me, I need to turn this way and salute. And so I want to be obedient. And so, I'm doing that. Like, okay. So the pastor I was with called up this entity that was speaking to this client, telling him to salute. And the entity comes up. And he asked the entity, this pastor grabbed a Bible and just flipped to a random verse I don't know what it was. And he goes, ask the entity, okay, if you're Jesus, well then, here's chapter verse. What does it say? And of course, uh, the entity got busted because he wasn't Jesus, which I thought was pretty ingenious. I was like, I wouldn't have thought of that, but that was a great idea. Anyways, I remember once, another time, I was ministering to a lady, and I could see in the spirit there was like an overlay on her face. Um, or I forgot exactly how it went. And so, some kind of way she was telling me, she's like, there's one here who says he's the master. And I'm like, yeah, right, the master. You know what? I call the master up. And when I did that, yes, I saw this overlay on her face, like the bottom half coming from here down. I saw like this beard and stuff like that. And I was like, and I got this sense that it was actually Yeshua, Jesus. And I started fumbling. I was like, like it, I had to reground myself and we kind of tested it. And it turned out, yes, that was him. And I was talking to her about this. And then I was like, you know what? I just need to make sure. I just need to ask again. And I'm like, I want the master to please come up. And immediately, again, I saw the same, the beard stuff overlaying her face. I couldn't see the whole face. And needless to say, I was quite embarrassed about questioning Yeshua if he was an unclean spirit. But then as I thought about this, I was like, well, wouldn't he want me to do what was in his word, which helped me get over that trauma? So, as I've stated before, it helps greatly if you can grow your spiritual discernment. I'm not really, rather, I am. I'm really big on spiritual activation, whether that's learning how to do the manifestation gifts in 1 Corinthians 12, or whether that's getting more in touch with your human spirit, or some of the many other ways, learning how to see in the spirit, etc. Um, and knowing the Bible in your head is good, but there's so much more to the spiritual life, like actually living it out, because the spirit realm is around us at all times, and we have to realize that we live in two different kingdoms at the same time. So I would like to leave you with these verses from the book of Hebrews, starting with Hebrews 5, verse 11. About this, we have much to say, and it is hard to explain since you have become dull of hearing. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the basic principles of the oracles of God. You need milk, not solid food. For everyone who lives on milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, since he is a child. But solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. And I'm not saying that to berate you. I just saying that to hopefully encourage you again to step out, to train your discernment so that it can grow, so that you can see the battle that we really are in. But I pray that this blesses you. This is Noe with Walk with Yah. And just know, maybe your miracle could be next.